There's no life left.
That's hard your eyes
You need to make sure that
You're right, I guess you're going to start. Okay. So if everyone's ready, I'll get us started. And let me introduce myself. I'm Michael Marks. I live in Richmond. I've been a member of the Mount Mansfield School Board for 7 years, and I share the long record. And tonight, we'd like to make a presentation to you to describe the work of the committee, why it is recommending that we vote in favor of a merger of our governance within our school districts. So we have a presentation to make, and then we do have a sign-in sheet which I'm going to circulate if anybody knows they want to make comments. But given the size of the crowd, even if the name isn't on here, you'll probably have plenty of opportunity to speak. But if I could just ask if we circulate, anybody wants to make comments? And does everybody know their Bolton School Board members? Or do we need to have them stand up and introduce themselves? Andrew, do you want to know? Andrew,
Amy Turner,
Mary Ellen Seeger,
Paula Georgian.
and Paula and Amy were both working on the merger committee as members and alternates who represented this community. So, John, I'll just do this one. I'm ready to have these slides slid over. First of all, I want to start with what we're talking about in terms of a voluntary merger. I think people understand that we have a very unique and different governance structure here in our schools. We have one school system, of course, that is supposed to guide our children from the time they enter until they graduate and become successfully. But we literally have 8 separate school boards that govern that school system. And the process we're talking about is the process by which we will merge the governance of this system. So instead of us having those 8 separate school boards, we are looking towards building a system in which we have one school board for this entire system. And it's outlined in state law, and if anybody wants to make reference to that or look it up, I'd be happy to provide that to you later. And this is probably the best explanation of why. That's our organizational chart. And forgive me if it's hard to follow, because it is hard to follow. What we have is we have the communities, and it's Bolton, Huntington, Jericho, Richmond, Underhill, and then this other community called Jericho ID, Underhill ID, which is carved out in parts of Jericho and Underhill. And each one of those communities elect school board members to local school boards that govern the grades K or pre-K, depending upon the community's offering up till now, through grade 4. Now, so that gets you a total of 30 different board members with authority only over those particular budgets and decisions. Then if you go to the right over there, that's the Mount Mansfield School District. And Mount Mansfield has the authority over grades 5 through 12, and in fact has been in place for about 50 years among all of our communities. Then if you go over one more step to the right, you see the Chittenden Supervisory Union. Now that has 21 members, so we add them to the 15 for MMU and the 30 for the others. And I think if my math skills are still working, we get up to 66 different board members. And the Chittenden Supervisory Union handles various responsibilities such as hiring our superintendent, our central office staff, trying to coordinate curriculum. Note this very carefully. We don't have any authority over the budget that may be needed for the curriculum. Handling negotiations, policy, and transportation, and in some fashion trying to make all this work together. And it's that organizational chart that really is the motivating factor. Our sense, and you see as we go through the presentation, is that this is an obstacle to us doing what we can do best for students' progress and also to serve the interests of taxpayers. John? Now, there is a wrinkle in the law in that if all of us approve of the merger, we're going to have a unified union school district. And we have only one board overseeing all the district schools. All the school boards that we now have would dissolve. Now, if one or two towns vote no, they still would keep their elementary school boards. But we would still form a modified union school board, and that would govern everybody else schools within this, for grades, kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, through 12th grade. John? And this is a list of the committee members. I put this up just for a simple point. It's a very diverse group of folks who serve in this committee. We have educators, retired administrators, school board members, a very diverse group who worked on this project. And obviously, you can check any of those names if you want to get more information about this. Now, this isn't the first time that we have had to deal with this question in our schools. In 2010, we engaged in a very extended study process. And as you can see there, we've listed the meetings. We had a total of 12 meetings of the Voluntary Merger Planning Committee, 7 community forums, and then a vote on June 7, 2011. Now, the vote passed throughout the supervisory union. It was a close vote, but it passed. It failed in 2 of the 4 communities under the law that was then in effect. If it failed in one, it could not go anywhere. Now, this time we're operating under a different law. The law allows us to have the merger if at least 4 of the 6 school districts vote yes. And this describes the process we've been through and we're going to go through to present this to the voters. We had a total of 15 meetings of the Voluntary Mergers Committee. And if you go to our website, you can see not only our minutes, but much of the background material that we studied. There's a lot of data that all the members of the committee dug into to think about this. We obtained a favorable recommendation from the State Department of Education, and there is shown on that slide. On August 19, 2014, the State Board of Education approved the proposal. Now we're going to go through some community forums, and on November 4th, it was presented to the electorate to vote by Australian ballot. And that simply tells you where, if you want to go to our website to get more information about that. I'm going to move through this quickly, but if you want us to come back with these slides, we can. So now I want to talk about the law. What's the rationale for this? We've looked at this from 3 perspectives. The perspectives of students, the perspectives of taxpayers, and the perspectives of our communities, how our communities want to govern their students. So let me start with the students, and I should emphasize that I think that is really what first motivated us to look at this. John, if you could go forward. The real impetus for this in the last couple of years comes from board members, educators, administrators saying, we have to find a system that does better for our students. We have good schools by all objective measures, but they're far from perfect. And we face a lot of challenges today as we try to figure out how to meet the needs of students. We have an achievement gap. We don't have students that will perform as well as other students. There are differences in the opportunities that we provide to each of our elementary schools. If you go among the different buildings, you see different facilities, different levels of support provided for students. And perhaps most significant maybe for this community, because this community, I understand, is very stressed by this, we have severe cost pressures. We've seen very significant budget constraints in the Bolton schools. And of course, the taxes here are very challenging for many people in this community. And that has led to us facing program cuts. We've also seen in our school system that our students don't get the full benefit of the work that we want our school administrators to do. We have very good school administrators, but they end up spending a lot of their time managing the 66 adults I talked about earlier from on the boards, as opposed to working on how we can make our schools better for our students. And we also find it very hard to innovate for our students. When you think about it, if you're really going to plan for a student's education and go from grade kindergarten through to grade 12, it requires everybody to be on the same page. Our government structure, it's very hard, John. So when we look at this, we said to ourselves, we think we can do better for our students. We think if we have unified decision-making structure, we're in a position to say, look, what we learn in grade 6, 7, or 11 about how our students are learning, that's something we can quickly and seamlessly apply to how they should be taught in the early grades. And we can think about how we're going to address the needs of our students as they get in the later grades from the moment they're in our school system. We can have our administrators focus on what they really should be doing, which is how to improve the educational quality for our students. In a nutshell, we're going to have one system that's focused on the continuous progress of students, as opposed to having 8 systems that may bump into each other and not be on the same page with students. Next, we looked at economic perspective, taxpayers. And if you look at some of the data, the state tracks spending on a basis called equalized pupils, and it's a calibration that's designed to look at what the costs are per student, allowing for the fact that it's probably more expensive to educate a student as she or he is older. And when we look at the data, MMU's equalized spending, and we're using 2013-14 data, is $12,935 per student. Within our elementary schools, there's a big variation, $13,387 to $18,170. Now, there are a lot of factors to account for that, but just look at that from the outset, and you see that the larger, the cohesive school system is in a better position to spend dollars to control spending than the 6 smaller separated school systems. And when we look at it, we think it really is a question of budgeting. Right now, we have 8 separate budgets controlled by 8 autonomous boards. They may set different priorities, and they don't have the ability to share those resources with each other. And even if they try to get on the same page, that takes time, money, and effort. So we don't see the current system as optimizing and taxpayers. And so this is just a chart to show you how much is at stake here. We spend, in the aggregate, over $43 million in this fiscal year. And we serve just under 2,600 students. And we have some very small schools, Bolton being the smallest of them all. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of our spending, $6.9 million about, occurs at the central office. In other words, that spending is voted on by the Chief Supervisory Committee and billed to the various schools as an allocation that they carry in their budget. So when we look at this, we say we think we can do better for taxpayers. I want to promise you that we will magically make this a cheap education system, because that's just not the case. But what we think we can do is by eliminating this obstacle of having these boards that are bumping into each other all the time, that we can have a more efficient system. That we can have a unified budget where we make our decisions about what our priorities are. We can share resources between the so right now, we have 2 campuses in which elementary schools and middle schools sit side by side and can even share most of their resources. There's also some benefits in particular for this community under the state taxing system. Once your community crosses the excess spending threshold or excess penalty calculation of your taxes, well, if we did this on a consolidated basis, we can avoid that penalty. And we think by focusing our administrators on educational quality, not governance, we put that in a position where their work can achieve efficiencies for us. Now, we've identified substantial efficiencies in our report, but we're also careful to note, I think it's just the beginning. I think once you free us from the constraints of this governance system, we can make more progress in that direction. John, can you switch to the next one? Now, this is an important part of the presentation, I think, for folks to focus on. Under the state statute that we are proceeding with, if this is adopted, there will be tax benefits presented by the state. They'll last for a total of 4 years. And the calculation is that each community would receive an 8-cent reduction, which is calculated from the previous year's tax rate. But it's capped at a 5% level, and it also can't lower that school's tax rate below the average for the whole district. So if this were to be applied in the next year, this community would have, and subject to rounding, an 8-cent or a 9-cent reduction in its property taxes strictly by virtue of the state subsidy. So let's talk about the impact on our community. Now, I know there have been a lot of people who expressed the viewpoint that the problem with this idea is it takes away local control. We looked at that very hard, and I will tell you that we reached the exact opposite conclusion. And right now, if you want to complain about something in your schools, you think we should be doing something different. The fundamental question is, who do you go to? Who's really responsible for it? We have 8 separate boards. We have a supervisory board that isn't elected, and by the way, it's not proportionate representation yet. So it's not even democratic in that sense. And they're responsible for so many of the important things that we do as a school district: hiring a superintendent, special education, negotiations. We just have a system where citizen accountability is very hard to see. And we came to the conclusion we can do that. If we were in a different place where we didn't have ties with each other, I might think about this differently, but for 50 years, now Mansfield has been working together successfully. It's a total of about 15,000 people, a little less than 2,600 students, and we know it has a track record of working together. We think that if we could build on that community and say, let's have a single board elected by everyone, give us all proportionate representation and accountability, that we can do far better for meaningful local control. So this is the chart you've seen before, which is what we have now. Now I want to show you what we want to replace it. At the top are our 5 communities, all of us as voters. What we want to do is establish one school board, 15 members, proportionally elected. Streamline line of authority down to the superintendent of schools, central office staff, principals, teachers, and our schools. We're convinced that that's a step forward for us. So how would this new board work? There's going to be 15 members. They will be elected, by the way, on November 4th. State law says you have to let the board members on the same day decide whether to adopt the new governance model. And I guess the thinking behind it is once you be ready to hit the ground running. Each town is going to continue to elect its representatives based on its proportionate population. And then, if approved, all the local boards and the CBSU board would transfer their operations to this new entity, and it would be running on June 30th. So I just want to review with you the reaction this proposal has gotten. It's not universal applause, but it is strong support. The committee itself voted 14-1 in favor of these articles. It has been supported by the votes of the school boards in Jericho, Richmond, Underhill ID here at Bolton, and the Mount Mansfield Union School Board. No board to date has voted against it, and 2 boards have not taken action on this to make a recommendation as far as we know at this point. So I just want to close by saying, we don't see this as solving all our problems, but we do see it as an important step, a step that gets us in the governance structure. And instead of being hamstrung as we try to address the challenges we had the ability to work together in a single community and address them in a responsible fashion. So that's our presentation. And so now I don't know if there is a sign-up sheet circulated, if anybody's signed up for it. Has anybody? So I think, Jen, you're the first name.
I thought that was attendance.
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
You're here, okay, so there's your comment. So Joanne, you're the next.
Isn't there somebody in the middle for Slack?
No, I know I didn't put my reading glasses on, but I don't think I need them here. So welcome, Joanne.
They're my favorite customer. I just have a few comments about what was said. There's more probably, but I think things that you should know. And that first was the state board gave great approval to this proposal. They did not. I was at the state board meeting, and so there were some others there. And what the state board did is they had trouble. It was a complicated ballot and a complicated proposal. And they said we have to do some work to get this understood. But you crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's. And so you've done everything that they asked, including making some corrections. And so it was good to go and should be decided rightly by the voters. That's very different than saying they didn't want to make a comment that would be supportive or negative towards the proposal, because they just had it there right in front of them. So it would take a while to be over that. And then second, the sharing between schools. There could be lots more sharing. Essex High School decided that they have 5 elementary schools feeding into Essex High School, and the principal, I guess, of the Essex High School study. We're seeing some differences in social studies. Maybe would be this school does a lot of studying about the Civil War, or some items like that on the agenda of the social studies program, and that seems to be a little weaker in fractions and some other stuff. And so they decided to make, they decided for all elementary schools that are come from 3 districts that feed into, one district has 2, I think another district might have 2 also. So what they did is they designed a study committee, a curriculum study committee, and they assigned teachers for each of those buildings that meet 1 or 2 times a month for 1 to 3 hours. And they do this every month, and they've been doing this for years. And so now they cover the curriculum. They say, well, I think we need more expertise in this area. You've got to send out the kids so we're on the same page. All that takes is some administrator saying, you need to do this in order, setting it up. There were teachers that volunteered, and one of them is a friend of mine, and she's been doing it for years. And it works out really well, because it's nice to be able to share with other 4th grade teachers or other social studies teachers, and kind of have that as their specialty. They teach all subjects. But it's really good to see what different schools are doing. And that way we have everybody coming to high school with the same background. Very, very similar. And so that was the second point. The third point is when if I have a problem, when I'm a parent, I have a problem with this school, I first would go to the teacher. I probably use the teacher several times. If I didn't get satisfaction with the problem, for my child or somebody else, then I would go to the principal involved. If that didn't work, I would definitely go to my local board members, because I know them. They live in my community. There's hardly anybody in Huntington that doesn't know half of the board members. Most of the people know all. They're familiar. And they have different opinions and all that, so it's good to talk to a couple. And if that didn't work, and if this is high school, then I would go to the comments. That's what you can do. You're much more likely to go to people and ask them questions if you don't. And they're much more likely to spend more one. So those three issues, and there's quite a few others, but those are stuck out in the next.
Thank you for coming. So the next name I have on the list, I'm sorry, is it Virginia Howland?
Haviland, yeah.
Howland, I apologize. Thank you.
I live here in Bolton. I work here at Smiley in preschool. Some of you might know. My kids went through here. I have two at NMU. And my thought on this merger situation, I've been back and forth for somebody in our community is worried about taxes and worried about the school closing. So it's kind of a balancing act. You want the schools to stay open. You don't want your taxes to go up. Where are these kids going to go? We're the only school, unless maybe Underhill ID, that's not full to over full. And we have universal pre-K coming down the pipe. I know 4 out of the 6 schools have pre-K, 2 do not. And there's no room for those preschoolers as far as I know. I don't know if this merger might be a way for some of those children who could really use some of that preschool education to go to a school that might have some room, like Smiley or perhaps the IB, and get that preschool education. And whether that would help to facilitate some of that. And I don't know, I mean, this is kind of a separate thing that has come up while this board has been in place, the universal preschool. And, you know, how this may or may not impact, and I didn't really expect to be giving a comment. I was kind of hoping this would be sort of a question, but I don't know if that's come up at any of the meetings.
Universal pre-K has come up with meetings. I don't think we have answers to that yet, and I'll probably turn to John a little bit on this because I think that whole process and how it's going to be implemented is still being examined. What we did examine carefully was the potential for school closures. Under the statute that we're operating with, if this is approved, there is a 4-year moratorium on any school closures unless it is approved by the local community. Separate and apart from that, though, now, if folks want to comment from the Bolton board about this, I think we are. Excuse me? Yes. For Bolton, there was a lot of conversation that went, we really need this if we're going to have the option to keep our school. And we heard that also from the folks under Home ID, that the costs have gotten to the point that unless there can be that cost sharing, unless they can get out from underneath the tax penalties that are imposed by Montpelier, it's simply not going to be economically viable. And so those are both things that we consider. Now, as Chuck pointed out to me, just to a certain extent, don't forget this. The exemption from having your school closed for 4 years is only there if you join. So if the school district votes no, then it's simply going to be up to its local board of voters as to whether they want to close their school and move it to a tuition model or not. And I hope that answers your question. John, are there any comments about every school?
A couple things I would share would be around capacity. We have been finding enrollment. We have had for the last 10 years in Chitton East in general. So most of our schools, I'd say the vast majority, have capacity for a lot more students if we had higher enrollment. One of the things that the committee talked a lot about was a new district having more levers to pull so that they could provide some different options around preschool and have some flexibility around where they would go, what they would look like, and sharing those resources listed.
That's responsible.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And I understand, so in this large school district, would that give us the sort of the school choice option? Is that kind of what you're referring to, John, that there is now in the MMU district?
There would be that option, where that option is not available now.
Right.
We have some things that happen where you have somebody that lives on the border of Jericho and Richmond, and they have to travel places where they really need to. So I think there's some reasonable, simple accommodations that certainly the board would look at. And if it does make it possible, there's help.
Why is it not happening?
But you have to go to school where you live, where previously domiciled. So, where tuition is really high, over 10,000 for all of our elementary schools. So, and if you, and I had the conversation with the AOE not too long ago, that if you say you're going to take a student and not charge tuition, essentially what you're doing is you're setting your tuition rate at zero for everybody. So if you have capacity, there's a potential that you need to take somebody in from wherever, it could be more benefit for other people, and you have to provide them with zero tuition.
So then, if we vote on this, we can public defines the merger of all the other towns or this school district. Will our children still have choice, or are children smiling? Moving on.
They use, say, Bolton voted to not approve the merger, then they have their independent elementary school, and they wouldn't have an option it wouldn't be a choice. And the other thing of that is, this just builds on Underhill ID. I mean, they had serious discussions, and these are in the meeting minutes, about tuition, having to tuition students because of the cost. And once you do that, you've lost all of it, because all you're doing is paying the bill. And I think they want to, at least the board wants to really avoid that.
Yes, go ahead.
If this school closes, is there any discussion as to where these kids are going to
We haven't had any discussion about it.
go? There's rumors floating around the community about them being sent to Waterbury.
Oh, I don't know where those rumors would come from, other than where rumors would start. There hasn't been any discussion on that. What we're talking about here is not closing schools, but changing the school board structure that would make that decision, create a structure that we think would create possibilities. Nobody said, gee, let's close the school, close that school, or anything like that. At least in our version.
The lawyer said that even if you vote no, you're the lawyer that represents. I went to that meeting. And they said even if the community votes no, that doesn't mean they have school choice. You're still affiliated with the supervisory union or the MMU district. So if you, like you said, like you vote no, then their grade school still has to find a person board. But their kids, you can't arbitrarily send your older kids outside. You're still affiliated with your district. There's no, if you vote no and you're getting school choice and you send your kids to Waterbury and you just go to school, you send them to River, that's nonsense. You're still affiliated with the other district.
I wasn't talking about the school choice, I was talking about the river that's floating around that says it's closes. They're going to send them to water.
But that's different.
I understand the district, so still they're here, and that's, there's lots of.
We never talked about that.
Well, I do know, I mean, I'm gonna vote no because I know that the governor wants all small schools closed. And I know that this whole merger leads to that. So I know 4 years down the road, we'll be closed. I mean, that's pretty easy to understand and see that coming down the pipe. And I've read a lot of articles about it, it's been a lot of, I've read them all. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be the final results if we go with the merger. So, and then we're not going to have any local control. Our kids are going to have a long bus ride. I know age preschool is on a bus for a long time. The bus is going to be very long. So that's one example. That's just one statement that I want to bring up. Another is, I think that before this whole merger stuff started, which is, of course, now behind time, so it's too late for that. But I think that our folks in Montpelier need to be doing some work to come up with a different way to fund education another way. You still use property taxes, you have the lottery, and you need another source of income to fund education, period. I mean, it's just been a problem even before the enrollment was declining. So I think that's where we need to be knocking on their doors on a regular basis. I think everybody in the state of Vermont wants to come up with another pool of money to help fund education. And my last statement is a question: how much money are we going to save with the budget?
Look, let me address that first and then come back to earlier. We put an analysis into our report that's online. And that projects very specific savings that we think we can achieve. But it explicitly states the following, that this is just the start. We think that once we have a more efficient governance system, that we can achieve other savings, because instead of having, and I don't have the slide right now, instead of having all these different boards that may not be on the same page, instead of having our central staff spending their time coordinating those boards as opposed to trying to achieve efficiencies, and instead of not being able to share staff and resources, we now have those opportunities. You can't put those in a spreadsheet, you have to develop those over time, but they're real. Now, I want to come back though to the comment about closing the schools. The reality, I think, is exactly the opposite of what you're doing. I'll have to defer to the school board members who are much more attuned to this. But what I heard from the local school board members as they participated in this process was, unless we get voluntary merger, unless we get the ability to work our budget on a coordinated basis as opposed to being a small, isolated school which can't share resources, we have to close. It's our legacy. Now, I don't want to presume to speak for the Bolton board members, but I do think it's important that you folks weigh in if I misunderstand you or what you were trying to tell us.
I think you got a pretty close time on that. Appreciate you pointing out a number of times in the presentation that Bolton is, I think, in a unique situation compared to some of the other districts. As you probably know, the student population is volatile and is down. I think the last 2 4th grade classes that we sent to Young Summit had 9 students. The reality of the environment that we're in is that Montpelier has created a situation where we're taxed heavily on the cost of the student. With a small school where our cost of the student is high. Pretty sure we're the $18,000 per student school. What we're hearing from a lot of taxpayers is that they can't afford school taxes. And that's true everywhere in the state, but it's particularly true here in Bolton, where I think it was 2 years ago, our school budget actually went down by a very minimal amount, but our taxes still went up by 10%. And given the environment and the way the tax systems work, and all the indications are that the government is going to continue to be going along those lines, we are very fearful that if this merger does not pass, that our budgets, even if they're able to decline, are going to result in much higher taxes that the taxpayers aren't going to be willing to pay. That may put us in a situation where we have to make cuts that may not allow us to continue to educate our students the way we should be educated. We may be forced with some choices. So the board is strongly in favor of the merger. Of course, we don't know what will happen in 4 years. If the school will close, that is a possibility. Another possibility is there may be more students. It may make more sense to bring students in from elsewhere, or to use the building for something different, or in addition to what's going on. So the Bolton board is strongly in favor of the merger.
When this initially took place. Could you speak up, please?
Sure.
So a couple of years ago, when you initially went through all of this, and you had 2 towns that said, we're not interested.
Yes.
What 2 towns were they still Huntington and the Anderson?
No, they're not Huntington.
Okay, we're not interested. Now it seems like Richmond is now interested in Huntington is still kind of on the fence.
Well, let me elaborate. This gets presented to the voters, and ultimately the voters decide. And it was an Australian ballot, I did it in 2011. And it failed in Huntington by a large margin. It failed in Richmond by a close margin, but it still failed. I see this process as another opportunity for communities to have that conversation. And hopefully to have a broader participation in the electorate. One of the problems with the ballot initiative last time is that it was put on election in June as a special election. I looked up the data in Richmond were about 670 votes. In the 2010 election for governor, which is parallel to what we have here, Richmond had over 2,000 votes cast. So I think it's also a different circumstance. And we had more time to think about it, more time to contemplate it. And it's really now time for the voters to decide. The voters may vote no again in some communities. Would there be a change? None of us knows for sure until we go through the process of having a conversation with people who agree and disagree. Does that answer your question?
I was just curious to see what the towns would call it. I'm in favor of this merger for sure. I have young children that don't go to school here because we can't make it work with working parents. I can't put my 3-year-old on the bus and get dropped off at home in Richmond. So I'm in favor of this. I would like my kids to have a choice of what they want to see. I think this is a great idea, especially because we are paying $18,000 for one of those 68 children. Vermont is just the age of state. It's what it comes down to, and it's starting to show, not just in our elementary populations, but in our high school populations, and now in our colleges.
Hi, my name is Jen Lemonnier. I live in Australian community, so let me introduce myself. I'm on the Bolton Select Board, and I'm also a parent of who's being very good. She's in 2nd grade, so I'm a smiling parent, and I will be for many years to come still. First of all, I wanted to say that it seems from my reading the board that would be elected in November, that Bolton would only have 1 representative. Is that true? 15 member board.
That is true. Bolton, the representation would be exactly as it is now on the MMU board, and it's based on populations. So every town gets at least 1 representative, but they're allocated on what your proportional population is.
So just so you all know, that Bolton would get that 1 vote, which we have in MMU has worked really well over the years, and you certainly know who to talk to if you have any problems. But I just wanted to bring that up. I don't think that was clear. Also, the importance of smiling. People hear from the same community, not just Bolton. So I want you all to hear that Smiley is super important to this community. Like, without Smiley, we don't have a post office, we have a fire department, we have a town office, but we don't have a post office, we don't have a town green, we don't have a meeting space of any sort. If Smiley were to close, or we didn't merge or anything else happened, we wouldn't have to have our town meeting at the fire department. You can decide how you feel about that, it's been done in the past. But this is really not only a community space for people whose kids go here, but also for community events like on Saturday. And also people who play sports here. There's even people from Richmond who come play basketball, volleyball, adults that is, in the evening. So I just want you to know that it's a really important space for our community and a lot of fun. I had a question about the overcrowding in the school population. When we did this study, we funded $5,000 about what students will do in schools. I believe I remember hearing that Richmond Elementary was very overcrowded, but we couldn't because of the elementary school really sharing kids and the legislative level at that point not bring in Richmond. you're saying it's not, none of this.
None of the schools are to the capacity that we're building. In fact, Richmond is 271 students. And I think at one time they were close to 400. So they've had a pretty significant over the last 15 years.
At the time that feasibility study was done, Richmond did not have the capacity to take all of our students. So the options that they considered were sending all of our students to Richmond, just looking at numbers into Jericho, those sorts of things. And we wouldn't have been able to send them all there at that time.
I totally agree with people in this room that school education funding on the state level has gotten everything. We did get a bit of our legislators about that. Bolton's still kind of doing that. So I would just urge everyone to say, hey, legislative session's coming up, time to write them, time to email them, and call them, because it's a really important thing, not only for us as a small community, but just on the state level, that everyone's feeling the crunch. It's something big that's got to change. And lastly, I want to know how in the district union, how things will be addressed that are kind of geared in for. For instance, did you know that our town office processes the lunch money stuff? It goes on for Smiley, like, how would things like that be handled? There's, like I said, very important things that I'm like, why is this office doing that? That makes no sense at all. Why isn't it the school that does that? So how would things like that be handled if we were to
That's a first for me.
It would be handled the way we do with them and do now, which is process through the central office. And then the board approves the warrants and bills.
Thank you. The next one.
The question.
Can you identify?
Oh, Chuck Lacey, I'm from Jericho, I was on the committee, I was on the school board. The smaller schools just use of space is something we did talk about. Again, this was not a committee decision, it was a committee to kind of evaluate how helpful would it be if we had a board that could make certain decisions. So if this passes on the board, it could have been school choice, so now we can't for elementary school choice. One of the things that we looked at is use of space. Supervisor Union rents space outside our schools for functions that could happen in an elementary school that had a smaller, had extra space as a way to help keep that school open. It's the central office of Richmond. It doesn't have to be it. It's in its own space right now because legally and tax-wise and all that, it's really hard to put a function that serves 8 different districts in one of those districts. So you have to have all these contracts between all the different bodies. If we were in one district, we could do things like move the central office and use one of the elementary schools, which the other offices are being split out. Or right now we spend $20,000 a year for students that go to tech programs at Essex, Burlington, and there may be a tech program that we can start somewhere in our district for our high school kids that might be part-time, like keep them in the district, so they spend half the day at NWU and half the rest of the day on some particular tech program. We couldn't do that in elementary school right now because then we're up against school choice between a high school and elementary school. It's not something that we can use. We're one district, we can use our space for a whole variety of things. And right now, with the independent elementary schools, we have things like professionals like nurses who are kind of divided up, point 1 here, point 2 there, point 3 there, and they end up with a lice issue in one school. They're all in one district. All the nurses could go, could go to where the actual need was. Just simple things. Other like Browns River and or say NMU and Jericho right now can't share a lawnmower because we've got different insurance, different budgets, all this sharing vacuum cleaners between Browns River and the ID district is to be kind of a blessing.
Thank you. Have fun.
My name's Jeff. I used to work in Chicopee, so we've been here for 11 years from that board. I just want to share a little historical perspective, but before I do want you to know that my state senators in school. I spent 2 years working at that as a senator, Waybridge, and one kid. Now, the entire one teacher was a little different than one kid. I would just like to share with you, historically, if you look around this room, I personally, this is the most attractive lunchroom, building room, gym in the state. This was built during my short tenure by a community vote when there was a moratorium on finances, on buildings. So the community vote voted $1 million bond to remodel the school, and this is part of it. This is a great classroom. It was nice windows and water. It happened that after we voted that $1 million, a couple of people with influence in the legislature, including put enough information on the gas staff. In fact, I've got some state fund help with it. Now, before we had this extension, part of the Bolton went to charter code. And so it was clear to me that this community of Bolton wanted to spend this building as a facility. I'm a local controlman. I grew up in the Midwest, and the local controlman very strong. I'm a local controlman. I don't know as many times as I can. Yes, I'm a local controlman once, but only go once.
You can vote once.
Just once.
You get voted.
But if I look back historically, at the time when we were throwing $1 million bond to remodel this building, the community said yes. I believe if we had a regional type school board, which is what we're talking about, I don't think we would have ever gotten it. Because we could have sent kids to Richmond, we could have sent kids to Jericho, and yes, some of our addresses were Waterbury. I mean, even the school's address is Waterbury. How many people live in the Waterbury address? Yeah. So who knows what the difference got with my community? The community issues and just great. Or just thanks.
Or not. Thanks.
I just want to introduce myself. I want to encourage you to think, and I am a sort of it. I have a lot of sympathy for what you so I have no prejudice. If, obviously, I wanted to. I just wanted to identify myself, read the report, see that towards the end of the minority statement. And I do give significant points that I presented tonight. I could have taken those same slides and made some comments that might have been a little different. So if anyone is interested in engaging in conversation, I'd be happy to do so. I will not advocate or not advocate one way or another, but I'm happy to engage in another interview. Sure. First of all, we don't hurt feelings for anybody, including everybody organizes wants the best for all the communities. Myself personally, my first and biggest hesitation was taking basically a well-functioning energy school board, 60 members. I know that people who are on that school board are very busy, they have a lot of input, and they're overseeing enough already. So my biggest concern was that we could basically take the same number of people, putting them in charge not only of an additional developmental age group, pre-K or 4, in their oversight. But we're also adding 6 And my concern is that for a volunteer body that is already busy, that's unrealistic. And that it wasn't a good plan. My choice would have been, we could have considered unifying our elementary districts to have the option of a unified elementary district. Again, candidates could go out and on. But I was much more comfortable with the idea of having a large unified board just overseeing big board. So that was probably my first biggest concern. I know people have said, well, I like the idea of one unified board, giving consistency from beginning to end. My sense is that in our university, we do have one supervisor, even if we would have two school boards, high school boards, and elementary boards, easily coordinate and oversee that. So my position is that we step back and say, what is it really trying to do? What is the best way we can do it? And I was deeply concerned that the motivation was purely to get tax incentives. I would point out that property tax savings that Sean returned is just for 1 year. Those savings rapidly evaporate. So it's my sense is that's not a reason to do it. Because the reason is that there's problems with how we are taxed, and the tax is too great. Well, we unified all our elementary districts, we could have enough population and avoid that issue with the threshold where we get open tax. So those are some of the reasons why I said, hey, let's hold off on this. I think we can really think more carefully about how we can address the problem. I don't want to overdo, and I know I won't be happy if I overdo.
Well, I'm happy.
Yeah.
The conversation is great.
Yeah. So those are my biggest concerns.
Thanks for your comment. It's fine. I think it's great to get all the inputs out there. We do have, though, as a committee, majority, we do have a different viewpoint on the specific points you just raised. We looked at it as being critical to think about not only how kids progress from the moment they enter the system to the moment they end, but to do it in a single board as opposed to having two different boards who can disagree. And it's not enough to talk about coordinating those curriculum decisions at the supervisory level, because it really comes down to where you're going to spend your resources and hire your staff. It's one thing to say, for example, we're going to have a curriculum that depends upon every kid in third grade having a computer, and then half your school districts say they don't want to do it, which could be our current model, or you have a disagreement between the school board of grades 5 through 12 and grades K through 4. In terms of the ability of the school boards to manage this, I've been on the MMU board for 7 years. We had many board members from both elementary and MMU board with rich experience. And when we focused on what it is that school boards really should be doing in terms of managing the administrators and seeing to it that policy is implemented and seeing to it that budgetary decisions are made correctly, we thought we could do that better on a unified basis. If I might just add one very personal note. There was a moment in my life as a board member where the light bulb came on and I said, we have to do this. I was sitting in a presentation in the MMU school board about 3 years ago. And John was presenting a presentation on how we might reach low-income students. We weren't doing this well on that. And it was a long presentation. It was a very engaged full board. I don't know if you remember this. But we're talking about all these strategies we could do, about how we could get tutors here, and potentially reconfigure curriculum there. We were going back and forth, brainstorming, trying to solve the problem. John says, now you know, by the way, that the single thing that's proven in the literature to be the most effective is preschool. It's 15 very engaged, committed people, myself included, I should say, just sat there and let it settle over. Just sat and let it settle over. Did this, while discussing the future of the kids. It just didn't happen. No, I just can't, you misunderstand. That can't happen.
Why did it happen?
It happened because we have this school board structure. But it's wrong that you can't think of all solutions.
My name is Jen Botzer, and I was actually the chair of the facility committee that put this addition here. And the driving reason for that was population. At that time, we had almost 1,100 children in high school. Now we have in the 800s. We had over 100 children here. We now have in the 60s. So, and the difficulty with young ages is that you can't predict the population 5 years out because they're not born.
There's a lot of babies being born in hospitals right now.
I know. I see the balloons on the mailboxes. You go by the picture the So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing is in my current job, I used to work at high school, and I did one of the things that Joanne spoke about is this coordination and committees, and we do that. And one of the things we know is that if children want to do well in jobs and in college, they need to have Algebra 1. And at the high school, we had a number of children who were failing. And we wanted to know why. We looked back at all the data, and we said, you know what, let's pull them in the room. And John and I did a research study. And we sat down, and we gave them pizza, and they all looked at him, and we said, what's going on? How come, and it wasn't, punitive, it was serious. And what they said to us was, well, in 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade, when I didn't get something, we just kept going. And so I didn't get a concept, and then it built on. And then by the time you get to algebra, you don't understand pieces that are essential down here. And what that said to me is, okay, we need to have pre-K through 12 continue. So we have these committees, and we set this up. But then what happens is you need workbooks, you need manipulatives, you need training for the teachers so they understand how to work with you who understands numbers this way and you who understand them a little bit differently. And that takes a lot of thinking and training about how young people learn. But then we have to put a little extra money in the budget, but then Underhill ID's budget gets voted down and they have to take something out of it. Smiley's budget gets voted down. It didn't happen this year, but the previous year it did. And the school board is faced with having to make cuts, which in a small school like this, where you have curriculum supplies for training, and you have $500 out of it, that's huge. It's a huge amount of money for the training, and it also takes care of some of the cuts that you need to do. So when you combine, you have these collective resources, the personnel and the training. And I think about those young children sitting around that table who there's this saying out there that says children don't fail algebra, they fail fractions. I want all those children to have the same opportunities as all the other ones. And so I want coordination, and we do the committees. We have a committee. But sometimes there are things that get in the way. So as a citizen of Bolton, I'm going to vote yes.
That's a cool question. Sure. There's approximately that's their bond. They're going to end up paying a portion of about $5,800,000 that other elementary schools have gotten bond issues and will now be passed on to all of us. And I didn't that we have like $300,000 in bonds, and now we're going to take about $3 million from Richmond and $1.5 million from Underhill. How is that? How do you see that being allocated? Is that
I mean, we're all gonna, I mean, the people in Bolton, the taxes will increase because they have to pay, they're gonna share,
I guess
well, they have to, we're all sharing 6 million.
you're missing part of the.
I mean, it'll be based on census and.
You're missing a critical part of the equation.
Sure.
If the merger occurs, it is true that all of our assets, and all of our debt will be pooled. And will be paid by all of us.
Right.
So in other words, instead of the community was about 1,500 people, you're going to have sole responsibility for the debt you have now. You'll be part of a community of 15,000 people. That would be part of it, everybody else's debt. And we looked at the data to make sure that each of these communities was in effect solvent, that their assets were higher than their liabilities. We have that posted on our website. And indeed they are. So I have to disagree with you respectfully, but I understand everybody has a viewpoint, everybody's viewpoint should be respected. But the fact is that if you look at what happens afterwards, it's not just that Bolton assumes other debt. It's that Bolton pools its resources with a total of 15,000 people who together are responsible. And it's really the same basic model as nothing different.
But I would think that in the case where Bolton and Clinton have low, at this point, have paid down their bonds to lower amounts, and other people are in a different portion of their cycle where they have large bonds because they want to have improvements, that it's going to get higher.
Well, I'll take a look at that data, but I don't think that's accurate, Chuck.
But you have to look at the asset and the debt. You take the assets for each of the 6 districts, subtract the debt, and divide by the number of students. It's pretty similar across the district.
Yes, but I don't pay interest and principal on the school building, I pay it on the bond.
Right.
She's not looking at the value of each district, she's looking at what's the debt
I'm looking
load.
at the debt.
I understand that, but you can't look at just the debt. I mean,
That's what your taxes, that's what your budget has.
I understand that, but then you're going to get the school with higher bond is not going to be prepared to assume there's one that has a lower bond and hasn't done his repairs recently, It's like saying, if you buy a car, $30,000 car with a $20,000 debt is worth, if you have $10,000 in equity, you can't compare that to a $10,000 car with $5,000 debt. You have to look at both.
So let me recognize Andrew, and I'll come back to thanks to Dr.
Just want to point out 2 things. Our school taxes are set based on spending per pupil. It's a complicated calculation, but that's what they're calculating. Most of the other districts in Chippewa are very close in terms of their school property tax rate. Bolton's about 14% higher. Over the course of a couple of years, we'll come together to, with the exception of common level appraisal, we would all be very close together. We would essentially have the same property tax rate everywhere in Chippewa that has chosen to join together. So there will be substantial savings in Bolton on taxes immediately. In a couple of years, we'll be in the same boat.
I agree with you, eventually it will be the same because other people will be sharing that load. But the question of the bonded indebtedness is totally independent, and it goes into the formula of how much we're spending per student. But Richmond has more bonded indebtedness than all the other elementary schools combined. So when we take our small bonded indebtedness in Bolton and spread it out against everybody, that part will go down. If we take that $3.5 million bonded indebtedness in Richmond and spread it across everybody, our bonded indebtedness at Bolton and Huntington and Henderson will go up. Absolutely. And the fact that that's irrelevant. That's what we'll get buildings.
Now I want to have a structured discussion here, okay? So I understand your viewpoint. There are other viewpoints, and John, I think you were the first one, and I'm going to go around the room.
In every scenario we looked at, regardless if we applied 8 cent
tax incentive or we didn't. The Bolton's taxes went down. So that was clear in every scenario that we looked at. So saying somehow they're going to go up because they're assuming this debt is just not accurate.
I just wanted to point out, second, what Andrew has said is that bonded indebtedness is shown through the cost we pay for equalized pupil. It's factored in there. Smiley's is already the highest, right? So if you look at what your price per, or not price, your cost per equalized pupil is, it's a fraction of that, right? Just thought of it as a stacked bar chart. That's in there. Smiley is at, what, 18,000? And part of that 18,000 is the penalty we pay because we only have 68 students. We have a $1.4 million budget. Just through the law of averaging, if you take someone like us with really high, with our high price per equalized pupil, and factor it in with 4 or 5 or 6 other communities, Smiley's is going to come down because everybody else is lower.
If I may weigh in, Doctor, I'll take another look at the numbers. If I may, if I can have the floor, I'll take another look at the numbers. I don't believe that your presentation really captures what the numbers are. Because if you look at both the assets and the debt, you see they are remarkably similar. But let me take this to another level. Every once in a while, I run into somebody who says to me, Michael, you're from Richmond. What do you care about the kids in Bolton? Kids are on the road. I say, look, wait a second. Part of this community, this now Mansfield community, is they're large. Everyone. Part of the reason that I have been so involved in this is I am concerned about what's happening to the children and taxpayers and the children and taxpayers of the community. And I don't look at this as a particular town getting something extra. I look at this as all of us as a community stepping up to that common responsibility we really do have to service everybody, doing well. So I don't think it's a question of getting out a slide rule. Remember those? Getting out a slide rule and saying, gee, is my town going to get 50 cents more in debt than $1 in assets? It's a question of whether we really can serve the interests of all our students and our taxpayers. I just think it's fundamentally an example of the role question. Perspective.
You have to very rules, like, people are couldn't protest votes because they feel the taxes are high. And so you have to keep that in mind, that people will look, that's why I asked the question, because people are going to want to know, how does it affect me? There are people out there that care about dollars and cents. I mean, and they are Australian ballot voting no on their school budgets. And sometimes it's because they disagree with the school budget, sometimes it's just because they want to send a message to Montana, so it's kind of hard to figure it out. Motivation. But it's out there.
Sorry,
My question is still about bond issues, but more forward-thinking. If the first one being how does that work with repairs and improvements in the future? How is that moving up on and how do things happen?
Well, if we were to form a unified school district, we would own all our buildings together, maintain them together. Now, this is an example of why I think it doesn't make sense to look at this. Now Mansfield has a very significant reserve fund that will build up 4 years. Because we're big enough and we can actually do some planning. And so we have a capital reserve fund to deal with the unexpected bumps and bruises that you're going to get with your building. Well, I don't think you see those in the elementary schools, do you? Because The elementary schools are budgeting in very small, discrete silos. And when it comes down to the hard decisions as to whether you should actually buy the materials that your students need for math, or put aside a reserve fund, you have to make that hard choice. And the net effect of it is that facilities in the elementary schools, there's a wide variation in the quality, but there isn't that reserve fund that's built up to deal with it. And that's one of the things that I think on a unified basis we can do. So that's
So we would all come together on an improvement for Richmond or
just like we do for MMU curriculum. MMU has a bond issue, we all vote together.
It wouldn't be, but it would be a vote amongst voters, not a vote on the board, correct?
For bonds, yes, it's a vote.
Vote on what in here?
Among voters, all voters of the union, the board would approve the agreement.
Right. The board approves it, and then it goes to the voters. And the voters see it.
I guess is the answer. First has to be an answer.
For example, we have a bond on any individual elementary building, it will be voted on by that town, it will be voted on by everyone. And I'm not disagreeing that the total bottom line is going to be going down. All I'm agreeing with is that the bond, we're all going to be sharing the bond payments. And the fact that one of our frequent elementary is so much larger than all the others, that simply means that part of everybody's budget. Everybody's paying for it. That's what I'm telling you.
It doesn't matter because
Seems that we're on course. Well, I thanks to everyone for the great discussion, great questions, and I appreciate it very much. Anything else? Get in touch with us and we'll try and answer your question. And vote on November 4th, everything. Okay.
You know how.
Thank you. As always, very fair.